Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. We finally have a Tottenham Hotspur Premier League victory to talk about. It's been a while. Mid-February, Aston Villa away. I think that was the last time Spurs won in the Premier League. Obviously, we've had a bit of a gap. Anyway, a natural break, or unnatural, I guess. But they're back to winning ways. And yet, still, other events around the game seem to be taking a lot of the focus, and obviously we're going to be talking about them today as well. There's kind of two certainties pretty much in life right now. One is that Tottenham Hotspur never ever do anything quite in the normal way. And the other one is that if Tanguy Ndombele doesn't start a match, a report will emerge from France shortly afterwards questioning his future at the club in some way. I'm trying to remember, I certainly wrote last week. I'm trying to remember if I said it in last week's video as well. But pretty much, I said if Ndombele doesn't start against West Ham, there will be a story that will break from France. And you know what? Talk about timing. I think it was actually published at the final whistle. So suddenly the news kind of all emerged about this. If you haven't heard it, if you've been living in a Tottenham Hotspur kind of exclusion zone. What the story was, it came out from one French media outlet, and I think then another French media outlet then also reported it, saying that Ndombele, ahead of the game, had a big bust-up with Jose Mourinho and declared, "I will never play for you again." He was then on the bench later that day. Obviously, for me, I don't want to do another journalist's work down because, quite frankly, as I'm going to go into, there clearly is something that's not quite right there. However, I think to go with a very bold headline after a game in which he's made himself available to play in, saying that he told the manager he'd never play for him again, it's kind of slightly contradictory, if you see what I mean. However, let's talk about it. Rather than, I don't want to criticise the story because, certainly I've done stories I'm sure other people wouldn't have been happy with and various things. But, where should we start? Let's start right at the beginning. So, wasn't chosen in the starting 11. I'll be honest, there was quite a bit on social media of people maybe expecting he would. For me, I didn't expect him to. I thought, am I surprised that he didn't play any minutes again? Yes. I did think he would. However, we'll come to that. I asked Mourinho all about it afterwards, so we'll come to those answers in a little bit. But for me, the way I want to kind of describe this, and this is something that Mourinho said after the game as well, is that right now he is trying to build a solid foundation for this Tottenham Hotspur team. It's a bit of a cliche, really. It's the obvious thing that a lot of managers try to do, is they go into a club and they'll try and sort out immediately defence if that's an issue. It's a massive issue at Tottenham. Tottenham used to have the meanest defence out there. In the Alderweireld and Vertonghen prime years with Rose and Walker either side, they were conceding pretty much less than almost, maybe, I think it was certainly 2 seasons they had the joint. One, they had the sole best defensive record, conceded the least goals, and I think the next year they had the joint best. So they had a great defence. However, players get older, players leave, and, it doesn't quite work. So I'd say in the last year to 18 months, Tottenham's defence has been nowhere near where it used to be. So obviously that was something that Mourinho had to fix. And we know Mourinho comes with a reputation of these tight defences that give very little away. At first, he didn't have a lot of time to work on that. He said that. He had various things he was kind of contending with. He was having issues up front as well, trying to sort that out. So clean sheets are rarity. What has happened that's different in the last couple of weeks, he's gone away and he said, he said this after the game, I was able to work quite intensively with the back four. I think by the sounds of it, and as you can see in the matches, he pretty much had chosen 4 players and he was just working bang, bang, constantly, these drills and scenarios with them. And quite frankly, it's worked. Whatever you want to say about the matches, the performances, the attacking threat, all of that, at the back, the defensive process, as he likes to call it, has been way better. Other than a slightly soft penalty against Man United, Spurs would have had 2 clean sheets from the first 2 games on the restart. So, with that in mind, he's not going to go for a crazy attacking midfield lineup. He's just not. That's not part of this. Now it's about, as he said himself, it's about building that foundation, and then once you've built that, then you give confidence to the other players, and the other players know they've got that behind them, and then you can kind of increase your attacking stuff. So ultimately, that leads to, you're not going to have a midfield three. You're just not in that scenario. So you're going to have the two that sit in front. So that's either going to be Winks or Sissoko, or as we saw on Tuesday night, Lo Celso and Sissoko. So in essence, Ndombele is battling with Lo Celso for that one spot next to a more defensive player. Does he deserve to get in ahead of Lo Celso? We've got to admit, I think Ndombele's got amazing quality. Does he deserve to get in there ahead of Lo Celso right now? Not a chance in the world. Not a chance. Lo Celso, as I'll come to again, another thing later, absolutely one of Spurs' best players, especially on the night, absolute class above. There was a moment with Mark Noble, which I'll talk about, which was just quite frankly show the difference in levels. And we kind of forget, I think, maybe, having not seen him in action, it kind of makes us just think about how good he can be. But it's got to be said, in the starts that he had under Mourinho, Ndombele didn't do it. He wasn't great. I'm trying to think, did he come on against Chelsea or come on in later? Certainly, obviously, started against Burnley and he was taken off at half-time. He hasn't been great. This is not a player who, on merit for his performances in the team, does deserve to start this match on Tuesday. So I don't really have an issue with that. I was watching him quite closely because obviously you want to see how players react. And at that point, none of this had come out in France. So in the warm-up, he's the kind of guy who's just got this natural, nonchalant way about him. In the warm-up, I was watching him with the other subs and he's kind of just slowly batting a ball back and forth with Lamela. Lamela's all like running and scurrying all over the place like he does even in a warm-up. Ndombele's just leisurely knocking the ball back and forth. It's not to say he's not working hard. It's just I think he's got this languid way about him that I guess if you're looking as a coach or the fitness staff, you're probably looking and thinking he's not really that fussed. And he's quite funny. He wears this hat in the heat, which, let's be honest, that's nothing to do with his performance or anything, but I just find it quite funny. It's about 27 degrees on Tuesday night, and there he was, this woolly hat. I've seen him in training photos in the day. It's like it's surgically attached to his head. I just find that quite amusing. It's nothing really to do with that. But then the strange thing I did notice during the game, and this is what led me, I was going to ask Mourinho about him afterwards anyway, but I noticed that every other single sub apart from Gazzaniga during the match at some point came and warmed up in front of us because our media area where we were on the left-hand side was right in front or just behind the piece of touchline where the players would come and do their warm-ups from both teams. And I saw everyone, and I think because I hadn't seen him early on, it kind of became a bit of a thing. I was like constantly watching to see if he ever did. And he didn't. During the entire 90 minutes, Ndombele never came to warm up down the touchline. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know. I did ask about it afterwards, but I didn't quite get an exact answer on that one. I don't know whether that means Ndombele didn't want to warm up or whether Mourinho just didn't ask him, or the fitness coach, I think it's Carlos Lalin, didn't ask him to go out there and warm up. It may be that. I don't know, so I'm not going to say either way. But I did think that was odd. And I've spoken to some other people at Spurs who did think that was a bit strange as well, that he just never happened to go and warm up. And then I watched him in the warm down. And he was doing, same as the warm up really. After the game, he's very much, does things at his own pace. You're watching them all running up and down the pitch and he's there at the back kind of jogging along behind them. Like I say, he's not putting in the effort. He's just not absolutely busting a gut like everyone else is. I mean, like Jedson Fernandez. Jedson Fernandez is sprinting back and forth like an absolute madman. Honestly, he's 21-year-old trying to absolutely show everyone, I'll do it. And then that's clearly why he came on in the first game at United. So he's got this way about him. We know about this. It's no secret. I'm not saying anything completely out of the blue if I say that at other clubs it's been commented upon, this very laid-back approach to his training and his consistency in his application. It's just what he is. Every single club I've found quotes from various people saying that about him. It's not, we're not trashing him. We're not saying anything awful that hasn't been said before. But I think the bit about it that was disappointing is that, like I said, everything I've heard over the break is really positive about how he's worked hard. Mourinho even said on Thursday ahead of the United game that he's pleased with his application. It's really good. And then obviously he's not coming on the pitch. So full-time comes, and then we get the news through from France that these reports were coming out. And like I said, I was going to ask Mourinho about it anyway. So no one else kind of was picking up on it, which obviously just left it for me to ask at the end. And I'll admit, if you listen, I don't know if the question is available on the Spurs YouTube or anything, but I actually kind of apologise because for me, and this is something that maybe it's a kind of a knock-on effect from the Pochettino. Pochettino used to get so annoyed and uptight if you asked about a player not involved after a victory. I get it. I get the logic. You know, this is about the players on the pitch. They've done what they've done. They deserve all the credit and the attention. If someone wasn't here, then what did it matter? They won the game. So I actually apologised. I said, I'm sorry to ask you about a player who wasn't involved after a victory as well, especially your first victory in 4 months or so. But I've got to ask, I noticed that Ndombele did not warm up at all during the game in any way. And now we're getting these reports of a bust-up between the two of you this week. Is there any truth in that? And to be fair, he just didn't flinch. There was he looked slightly confused. I was saying it as if to say, like, what? And he just said very straight, no, nothing. And then he explained, look, there's other players who haven't played a single minute yet. He's got Vertonghen, Alderweireld, Sessegnon. He said, these are big name players that haven't played a single minute yet. And he said, because I then kind of said again, I asked, has he actually been okay with you then this week? And he said, yeah. He said, he said, I can only pick 11 players. And he said, and I do sometimes apologise. And it kind of seemed like he was referencing Ndombele in this. He kind of said, I do apologise sometimes when there's players that I feel haven't been able to pick them because of the tactics or the team. They may have done really well in training, but I haven't been able to put them in the first 11. And I kind of felt he was referring to Ndombele there, so which leads me to hope that he is continuing this good training. But yeah, and then he said, I think his actual final words, I haven't got the exact quotes to me, but he said, I had the team, I had what I wanted to do, and I just didn't need him for these 2 games. And we're going to go on to this later, but if you look at the 3 subs he used, I do understand each of the substitutions did exactly what he kind of said he wanted them to do, and they did. There's no getting around that. So I think it's one of these we're going to have to keep an eye on. For me, the fact that he never even warmed up, that triggers a slight warning to me and a bit of an alarm bell that was a bit odd. And Mourinho didn't really, that was part of the question, he didn't really refer to it. And then we kind of run out of time, so I couldn't really keep questioning him. I was the last question. But I don't think it's quite to the degree, that, it's maybe being painted to be. Certainly it doesn't sound like there was an enormous bust up from anything that's coming out of the club, but then, people could rightly point out, are they going to admit to that? But, I asked Mourinho directly about it, and he said no. For me, do you see Mourinho as the kind of person that if he felt that the player was in the wrong, would hide that? Because let's be honest, in this scenario, yes, Mourinho, people will point to this history of, players he's fallen out with, and they'll obviously use Pogba, who obviously is a French teammate of Ndombele's. But Ndombele also comes with this past as well of not giving everything to his managers. So I do feel that, as he did after the Burnley match, if Mourinho had wanted to come out and say either he wasn't giving enough in training this week, or he didn't want to get up off the bench and warm up, which I'm not saying is the case, I'm just using this as an example, I think he would have said it. Every dealing that I've had with him thus far, he's just said exactly what he's felt. And I don't see the benefit of hiding something like that. If there was a big bust up or there was a disagreement, I think he would probably say it, and he would explain maybe why the player did it or why it had to happen or something. Do you see what I mean? It doesn't strike me as something that is worth hiding. And also, as I said, kind of predicted this. Well, exactly predicted it. It's just, there's something about the entourage around Ndombele that, whether, I'm sure he's not happy. Why would you be happy if you're not playing minutes? I totally get that. But there just seems to be this instant reaction. Oh, quickly, let's leak. Let's get some story out there in the French media. Quick. Let's do it. Let's drum up some interest. And that seems to be what it always is. It's almost like, I don't want to use this example because it's really, it may not be who exactly it is, but you just kind of get these vibes of this entourage and wanting to move on to the next thing, whether that may be, I don't know, a payday or a bigger, warmer place, although it's pretty hot out here at the moment. It may not be those things. I'm purely speculating, but just to me, there's an incredible coincidence that every time he doesn't start a match, pretty much, a story appears in the French media. It's an incredible coincidence. Having dealt with, people close to players, agents, like accountants, financial people, anyone involved around players, there's a lot of places that a dissenting voice can come from. And I think there's a frustration in Spurs. I said this like months ago, when after the lockdown breach, where, because this is the other thing as well, Mourinho clearly is trying with the player. He went over to his house, did all this work with him, which he shouldn't have really done. This is not a guy that has just ostracised and exiled this guy and said, look, you're not for me. He is a guy who is clearly trying to work quite hard with this guy and demand the very most out of him. And at the moment, he's not quite deserving of starting in that first 11. Does that mean you immediately look for other things? And like I said, I do feel that people within Spurs and around Mourinho do believe that the people around Ndombele are trying to push him towards the exit. Let's hope they're not. I really do. I'm aware I've spoken for 16 minutes about Ndombele, but it's kind of, I think that sums up the person and how frustrating it is that this guy has the potential to be one of the most gifted players in the Premier League. He is sensational. But he has to work within the team fabric, because if he can, let's for example say Mourinho, if he builds these foundations and then brings in a defensive midfielder in the summer, then he can have this midfield three. My God, can you imagine Ndombele and Lo Celso in front of a defensive midfielder, an anchorman who just sits there? It would be lethal. It would be playmaking, dribbling, retaining the ball, stopping the ball with a defensive midfield. It would be amazing. And then you'd have, Kane with whoever either side, Son, Bergwijn, Lucas, Lamela, Ali if he needs to. Ali could play in the three, as well in the midfield. It could be sensational. But Mourinho needs to build that foundation first. If you go with a midfield three now, I think you're exposing and opening that defence again to all kinds of issues. The other alternative is maybe you play him in the Dele role, which he looked to be doing in the in-house friendly, where we saw like clips of that. You'd hope he gets minutes. I think we'll see against Sheffield United. If he then doesn't get any more minutes, then it's either some kind of form of punishment for maybe this kind of stuff coming out in the media, which the trouble is, with these two characters or these two kind of sides to it, the more that one side pushes, the more the other will kick their heels in. So if Mourinho was to come out and publicly kind of humiliate him, perhaps that's going to make the stories just intensify. And if the stories intensify, Mourinho's going to kick his heels in and say, well, I'm not going to play you if you're just going to keep on kind of, whether it's indirectly or whether your people are putting out these things. It's just such a silly, delicate balance. Whereas, Spurs have always made it very clear that he's not for sale. He's a club record signing. If I looked at the email that Leon sent out on the day Spurs signed him, saying that, in total, it'd be 63 million they'll get for him with all the add-ons eventually. And you kind of think, if he doesn't work, you can forget Spurs buying big-name players ever again, because that was the biggest risk and gamble they've ever taken on a transfer in their history. And if it doesn't work, they're not going to do that again. They're just not. So they have to make it work. And I think there's probably a bit of pressure on Mourinho to make it work as well for Daniel Levy and the club, because he is a sensational player. You've just got to work out how to use him. And I guess the key, as I've just said, is when to use him. It's one of these things, he gets in the team and he proves himself. That's the key. Take the chances when you get them. And if he gets the chance and he takes it, all of this goes away. Players just want to play. Managers will just want to see them giving their all for the team. If you get both of those, everything vanishes. Let's not forget, Son wanted to leave after his first season, wasn't playing regularly, wasn't happy with the football, wanted to go. I'm sure there's very many others like that. And obviously Son's the biggest example because he went on to be an absolutely brilliant success at Spurs and in the Premier League. And hopefully Ndombele will as well. So let's probably move on from Ndombele. There's everything in that. You can take whatever you like out of that. Well, I've done a couple of pieces on him. I feel like I've kind of written and talked out on Ndombele. I'm sure it won't go away anytime soon. I'm sure we'll get more stories. Of course we will. But hopefully it all comes together for Spurs' sake and the players' sake, because I kind of feel like if he keeps on going into the next club, wherever that may be, if he does go on, then it's just another club to the list where he maybe didn't do everything he could have been, or fulfilled every bit of potential he's got. So let's talk about the match. Happier stuff. Harry Kane scored. Brilliant. After, Friday night's match, I felt so sorry for him. He looked rusty. He looked completely lacking in service. Never touched the ball in the United box. 36 touches in the whole game, less than anyone else on the pitch. Bang. This game, he was everywhere. He actually didn't have great service. I actually thought that Lucas, Son and Dele behind him were not great at all, I'll be honest with you. I thought they were probably the weakest parts of the pitch, those three. Son eventually came good with a really good kind of through ball to Kane. But I did feel before that, the three of them, they gave him so little service, he was having to come deep again. But he had shot after shot. He had a couple from distance. He had a little clever back heel early in the second half. He had the one from Lo Celso. Lo Celso, terrific, kind of got into a good position, played the ball across, and he just knocked it across goal. And I think I tweeted it. I said he's getting sharp. You can see it. He's starting to get his eye in. And then bang, at the end, Son puts him through. And weirdly, despite everything else that he'd kind of done in the previous, whatever it is, 90 minutes in the first game, almost 90, it was 82 minutes in this one. It's 172 minutes of football. I still expected him to score. And I think that speaks volumes about Kane. I think we all did. As soon as he's one-on-one, you kind of expect Harry Kane's going to bury that, and he did. And I loved his kind of, I say celebration, it was more a flomp to the floor. He just kind of, he said afterwards, this isn't a Klinsmann. I was absolutely shattered. There's probably a big old dose of relief in there as well. Because he was knackered, and he's played 90 minutes worth of football, which is great for him. And you'd think against Sheffield United, you'll see a sharper player, a player with 2 full games in his legs, and also, the belief that he can score again as well. Sorry, I'm aware I'm actually boiling because it is really, really warm in here. So apologies for anyone that's getting this in HD, and I'm looking very sweaty. But yeah, great to see. So a couple of stats for you. There's his 137th goal in his 200th Premier League appearance for Spurs. Ridiculous numbers. His 8th in 12 matches for Jose Mourinho. So all this garbage about he's not going to score under Mourinho, it's just, we're not going to go into that. I think Mourinho said enough about Paul Merson's comments on that, even if he got the drop a little bit wrong. But yeah, 8 goals in 12. He's scoring goals. He will. And he will get more chances, I think, as the players behind him, improve. I felt, like I say, Son came good later on. Dele, it very much felt like a player trying to feel his way back into playing football. Obviously he was suspended for the first match, so he was kind of where everyone else was at the start of the previous game, and I just felt he worked hard. He always does, Dele, but I just don't think there was much quality there. And Lucas, Lucas is great as a person. He's terrific. He's a really interesting guy, really great to interview. As a player, I still always feel that he's better from the bench as an impact sub. I think as a starter, I think against fresh legs, he's maybe slightly predictable, especially with Aurier bombing down the right. I think Lucas comes in field, and you just know his main idea is he's going to try and run past 2 or 3 people and get a shot away. That's kind of what he does. A little bit Andros Townsend-y in that respect, although I think Andros Townsend has probably gone on to become a more rounded player after leaving Spurs. But I think with Lucas, he needs to find a bit more of another string to his bow. I've said this, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I'll always believe, and certainly up till now, his goals and assists are not enough for a player of his quality. He could do so much better with that. So for me, that didn't quite work. But behind them, Lo Celso and Sissoko worked really well. I thought Sissoko covered all the ground, and Lo Celso, as I said, what a player. Absolutely brilliant. I think for me, I wish you could clone Lo Celso, because I'd love to see a Lo Celso playing in that 3 behind Kane, because every time he gets into an advanced position, he makes something happen. He played Son through for the goal that wasn't. The VAR ruled it off. He played in Kane for what should have been a goal. It was his corner that eventually kind of bobbled in. I don't think he actually gets an assist for that because he hasn't actually had a Premier League assist. And in this game, arguably he could have had 3 and it just didn't happen for him. But in that deeper role, he's also superb. He tackles back, he slides into tackles, he hassles, harries, passes the ball, keeps possession. And the bit I referred to earlier, the Mark Noble thing, oh my God. He kind of jinked around Mark Noble, who was just left absolutely flummoxed, just chasing after him. It was like, like an old man in a garden trying to chase his grandson playing football and dribbling past him. And eventually he could only grab onto him and he got a yellow card for it. Lo Celso's class, absolutely class. And, we talk about, the same with Ndombele, we talk about giving players time to adapt. They do need it, foreign players coming into the Premier League. But I think Lo Celso, his adaptation has been ridiculously quick when you look at it. He obviously took him a little while to begin with, but then I think it just suddenly got the idea, maybe it's an Argentinian thing, Lamela's adaptation has been more about injuries, but I do think their natural aggression and the physicality of the way they play football in the Argentinian league maybe lends itself to the Premier League because, he doesn't take anything from anyone, Lo Celso. He absolutely gets on with it and gets stuck in. So, yeah, superb. But I want to give probably the biggest kind of props, I guess, to the back four. I just thought, as I said, he's been working closely with them, and there were certain players. I mean, all of the back four did well. I didn't think anyone had a bad game in that back four. I think Aurier, I know I'm quite hard on him sometimes when he gets caught upfield and stuff like that. But I thought defensively he had a much better game than Friday night. There was no giving away of the ball in silly areas like he did against them. I'd say probably the one downside maybe he got into really good positions in attacking sense, but actually his delivery or final ball was a bit naff. But he was getting in the position, so that's fine. I know it's his role to be the winger. And I thought he played much better. I thought on the other side, I know people don't get excited about Ben Davies. He is, we give him a nickname in some of us in the media, Gentle Ben, because he's just a very nice, well-meaning, gives everything, total team player. And I just think, but because he doesn't make headlines, because he doesn't do step-overs or, ridiculous things with the ball, or he doesn't fly with pace down the side, I think he maybe doesn't get his dues. And I think he's really, this was probably one of his best performances. I always see, whenever I talk about Davies, people always say, oh, but he doesn't contribute as much as Danny Rose and blah, blah, blah. I know there's a lot of Danny Rose fans out there, and I don't want to do him down too much. But what I would say is, I think Danny Rose, sometimes the gusto and energy he brought and the passion sometimes overshadowed the fact that he actually didn't do enough creatively when he was going forward. I don't think he really weighed in with enough assists as probably he should have done. A bit like I was just saying about Aurier, getting into those really good positions, I don't think he actually did enough. Whereas with Davies, I think he could have had 1 or 2 assists certainly. Who did he almost set up? Lucas. Gave Lucas a ball straight in the 6-yard box pretty much that Lucas just had to tap home almost and hit it wide. And I always go back to this year because the year that Danny Rose was out, Ben Davies created more chances for Tottenham Hotspur players than any other defender in the Premier League did for their team. I will always throw that back at people that say he doesn't create enough. He does, and he can. I think he's had injury issues in the last year or so. But I think the biggest thing for me was, with no crowd at the stadium, you get to really hear these players. Ben Davies is a leader. And I must admit, I didn't know that before the crowd noise wasn't there. He constantly talks. He constantly instructs other players. He talks through the attacking players through a game, telling them where to go, when to track back, when to come back. Steven Bergwijn came on. Honestly, he was like his personal cheerleader, Davies. Every time he did something, you just heard in this Welsh accent, like, Stevie, Stevie, and he was constantly clapping and saying, well done, whenever he came back and intercepted something. He is such a team player. He's the kind of guy you always do want in your squad, in your team, because he elevates other people around him. And I just think, I didn't realise maybe that until watching him without the sound, as it were, with just his sound coming through. I thought he had a really good game defensively. He was up against Jared Bowen, who, People have heard me talk about Jared Bowen. I just think he was always made to be a Premier League player. He was West Ham's best attacking threat by a mile, honestly. But I think Ben Davies contained him really well and kept forcing him inside. He really didn't get much joy down the West Ham right at all. Honestly, let's give a little bit of appreciation to Ben Davies. I think he gets this kind of he's not a top 6 player. I've seen all this sort of stuff. That guy, in previous seasons when Spurs have absolutely been flying, he's been at left back. Danny Rose has been out injured for a big old fair chunk of time. Let's not forget that. And Ben Davies stepped in after patiently waiting or playing every other game when Poch used to rotate his fullbacks. He is a really good left back, and I think if we're looking at someone like Ryan Sessegnon to come through eventually, I can't think of anyone better to kind of learn alongside and then maybe one day take over from. He really is. And also the fact that he's versatile enough to come into the centre and make that back three, I think is absolutely vital to what Mourinho wants to do as well with the back three, back four thing that he does in and out of possession. So that leaves you to centre-backs. Eric Dyer, I thought, even better than the United game. I thought he was really good against United, apart from the penalty, which I blame him more for letting Pogba dance around him than the actual foul itself, which was a bit soft. But in this, again, same without the crowd, he constantly talks, constantly leads. And I think that's probably what Spurs defence has been lacking, a leader character. I think Lloris, you can hear him, he's very much an organiser. He's constantly telling the four in front of him where to go and where to be. But I think Dyer maybe talk through other players as well, a bit like Davies. He can see more of the pitch in front of him. He hasn't got anyone, he's got less people in front of his view. And I thought he played really well again. West Ham barely had a sniff. I think there was one, was it Bowen having to come over to the left-hand side of the pitch, hit the post. Was it Bowen? I'm trying to remember if it was Bowen or not, but that was pretty much it. It dealt with set pieces. Moyes, it was always going to be about the set pieces for David Moyes. They haven't really got the attacking quality. I'm quite, worried. I do think West Ham fans should probably be worried. I'd say they don't look like a team that's going to score a lot of goals, and that could be the difference between staying up and going down. But they're going to be quite strong from set plays, because that's something that Moyes has always been very good at, back in his Everton days as well. But Spurs bossed it. As Mourinho said, other than one soft penalty, Spurs' defence have pretty much dominated the attacks they've been playing. Martial, we saw him score, it was a hat-trick, wasn't it, yesterday? And against Spurs, barely had a sniff, honestly. Was almost anonymous. Anytime he got a chance, you had Dyer steaming in for a challenge, Lloris pulling off a great save. I think that defence with Lloris looked quite steady as well, other than one little kind of flap from I think it was a corner. Yeah, I think you can see that four forming. I do wonder what Vertonghen and Alderweireld are thinking, because, quite frankly, I wouldn't change that four right now. I think just keep getting them familiar with it and working with the way Mourinho's drilling it into them, and I think Spurs will start to become solid again. And then you'll see, as you said, the players in front of them start to get that confidence, and it'll all click. So the Sheffield United game is going to be quite interesting. I just want to talk about the subs. I did promise to talk about them. So Mourinho, explained afterwards, look, as well, this was the other thing he said to me, is like, people think that because I can make 5 subs, I should make 5 subs. He said, that's not what it is. He said, the possibility is there to make 5 subs, but that doesn't mean I should. He said, each of the 3 substitutes I brought on were there for a purpose. Lamela came on and absolutely did what he was meant to do. He won the ball back, he was tenacious. He won the ball back and set away Son for the Kane goal at the end. Bergwijn came on, worked really hard, tracked back, made great interceptions. They actually did the defending side of things he wanted. And then Winks came on at the end and just kind of kept the ball. Just did exactly what he asked of him. Of course we could argue on Ndombele might have done that. But I suppose ultimately, if you're going to be entirely honest with yourself at that point, with it being 1-0, could you do you trust on Ndombele yet to keep the ball? Maybe not. And I kind of get it. I do get it. I get the frustration why he's not playing, but I also can understand why, if the likes of Vertonghen and Vertonghen and Alderweireld aren't getting matches, or Sessegnon any minutes at all, then I can kind of see why Ndombele isn't, although don't get me wrong, I'd love to see him on the pitch, but I think it would maybe have to be after they were 2-0 up, perhaps. Maybe that was the time. But then he didn't warm up, which may be another thing. We need to know exactly why that is. I'm sure people will ask further about it, I'd imagine, before Sheffield United. It's not going to go away anytime soon. As I said, I won't be shocked if more stuff comes out from France. It just will. So this leads us to look at ahead. Sheffield United, they've got a break. Obviously, it was 9 days after the West Ham game, which he wasn't a massive fan of Mourinho. He said, I'd rather play the matches because it's now we're going to have a game after that of every 3 days, pretty much. Sheffield United are massively struggling. It's a bit like, remind me of Burnley back in that season when they were right up there in the top 5 or 6, where they just kind of started to run out of steam a bit because their squad naturally isn't going to be as big. And, they've had a few injury problems and it will still be tough. Of course it will. They're a very clever team. Chris Wilder's a very tactical manager. It's still not going to be an easy job for Spurs whatsoever. But, with Spurs gaining a bit of confidence, Sheffield United losing some, Spurs should feel that they can go there and do it. They need to, especially with Man United winning that game. And obviously this is being recorded ahead of whatever happens with Chelsea and Man City tonight. So every point, pretty much, if Spurs don't win, as I think it was Kane said, didn't he? They need to win 8 out of the 9 games. And I kind of feel he could be right on that as well. United having not convinced me at all against Spurs, then obviously went and played Sheffield United and buried them in goals. So it does show that kind of the bigger teams, especially as they get more of their players get match fit, they're going to start bringing their A game, and Spurs need to as well. So it's going to be a tough game. I think we'll see. It didn't seem to sound like there were any knocks after the game, so hopefully no fresh injuries or anything. We're still waiting for the Eric Dyer decision from the FA. Hopefully that's not going to be anything bad, although my gut tells me that it might be, just purely to discourage players from going into the crowd. But Spurs need to keep on rolling because they need to keep getting his confidence. And as I've said before, even if that's just a case of taking that into next season, if this season doesn't bring Champions League, if they can then take it into next season, Mourinho can start on that front foot with some new additions. I can kind of say that was the first time yesterday, I think it, combined with the Man United match, I can see what he's trying to do. I could really see that the defence is properly drilled now and looks more like a Mourinho defence. I do think that Dyer-Sanchez partnership works really well. Again, it's quite funny that ones that got not to say abuse, but probably were less loved, let's put it, than other players. I do think it's quite interesting that they're coming now out of their shell under Mourinho and playing some really good football. So they're doing their jobs, and now it's just about getting everything else to click. I think those attacking midfielders still have to click behind Kane. Good that he's scored a goal, but no, I'm looking forward to it. There's no real kind of transfer-y stuff to talk about, unfortunately. So Thomas Meunier obviously has moved on to Borussia Dortmund now. As I said, he was always going to be a guy that was going to have his choice of Europe, pretty much, all of the teams. As I've always said, Spurs are going to be looking at those deals for players in the last year of their contracts. The Højbjergs, they'll be keeping an eye on the Ferguson at West Brom situation as well. I'm trying to think if the young QPR lad, Easy is in his last year as well, possibly. And then obviously we've got Willian. I'm not entirely sure whether Ryan Fraser is a Spurs player or not. I've consistently said that. We'll see on that one. But I think there seems to be at Spurs, they're not really going down the transfer route just yet. I'm sure they'll be making inquiries in the background and things like that. But I think they're just waiting for the season to end and they're going to kick into gear. And it sounds like there will be transfers, which is good news. Not big spending transfers, but certainly some that will improve and that Mourinho will want. So there you go. Right. This incredibly sweaty man on your screen. Again, I apologise for that. But it's a very warm day and no windows seem to be open in my house, which doesn't help. So I shall catch you later. Sheffield United is the next one. I might do a video beforehand if anything else kind of comes up. And look after yourselves, stay safe, and let's hope we can be talking about another Tottenham victory next week. Catch you later. Bye.